There you go. Oh, look, the eternal.
Let's try again. Okay. We try again. There we go. Yes, I am. Okay, so we've got our little Advent wreath here. So
I want to do one.
that's for last week.
Oh,
And it's for this week.
there we go.
Okay.
Oh, and then when it winds up, one will be teeny tiny, bigger, big. So it's a,
Yeah.
okay. So that's if you like two that are inverted, you have two at the same time. Okay. That's right. We have a very unbalanced.
How long we've been doing that?
Oh, yeah, I know.
You never noticed that.
We have a very unbalanced Christmas. Look at that candle.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, let's start with our opening prayer here.
Actually, there's a lot of stuff I don't notice even after a lot of years.
All right.
There's a lesson in every day that the Lord gives.
True enough. Let us pray. In the midst of an accelerating frenzy of the holiday shopping season, O God, we yearn for a more compelling sense of your presence. Draw us into a quiet space where we may encounter your Son, Emmanuel, God with us.
Amen.
Amen.
The reason for the season.
Indeed. All righty. So, who's the keeper of the lore in your family? Who keeps all the family stories?
Family stories, the history.
My family, it's my dad's cousin Jane, who is, I think, 98 years old at this point. She has all the Henninger side anyway. Dad's got a good bit of everything else, and Jean has a chunk.
Right.
All on the Douthit Henninger side. So I guess I end up being the one who's got the other side now, the Faust side of the family, my mom's side.
Right.
So how about y'all?
I would say both of my grandmothers.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do most of the talking,
Mhm.
sharing stories. So
Yeah. Bertha?
I guess my sister and I were the oldest.
Yeah.
Kind of scary.
Yeah. Who keeps it in your family?
Laura and I both talk about, where we came from and everything, but all the parents have passed away and my cousins are useless for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
God bless them all. So I guess it kind of falls on to us, Yeah, that's probably where it comes from.
Yeah.
Nobody left it.
Yeah.
Well, she accuses me of telling stories all the time and enhancing them and embellishing and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's part of the process.
Oh, yeah, so, all right, then I'll claim that mantle.
Yeah. Those stories, even though the stories get told every Christmas, they change a little bit. Right?
It's usually all for my examples, all the errant misdeeds and mischiefs caused with my errant mischievous friends. Ben doesn't need to hear about that.
Of course he does.
Of course he does.
Of course he does. How's he gonna know if he doesn't?
That's exactly. That's what I tell it all the time. He needs to know that you drive around with a van full of snow in the middle of July, you can throw snowballs at other cars.
Did it get snow in July?
The ice rink.
From
The
the
Zamboni.
Zamboni.
The Zamboni was dumped mountains of snow. So this is July or maybe August, and my friends we were looking for something to do.
You can tell us about that later. I want to hear that story. But
yeah, we came up with a brilliant idea.
Tell me later. Tell me later. We got a lot to do.
I'll just say it this way: we threw snowballs at the wrong car.
Oh.
2.5 hours later. But I'll let Ali else say that.
All right. What kind of forms does your family history take? Is it mostly the storytelling, or do you have the books and the charts and graphs?
One thing I miss, and we used to do this a lot around Christmas time. Of course, I have all this stuff now. Mom had bunches of pictures
Mhm.
and that dad took and that the family took and that kind of thing. And I now have all those. My brother's wife was kind enough, he's coming into town, it's great, to digitally record them onto one of those screens.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
But we'd
Right.
sit there and look at all the family members and all that from, people that even passed away before we were. So that it was mainly pictures and oral for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, Molly, when we go out to Colorado and see my mother-in-law, that Molly and Carol just sit and they pull out all the
That's,
Uh,
yeah,
photo albums.
Right.
and,
I
you know,
enjoyed
just
that, actually. I did.
every time.
I should do more of that with Ben.
Yeah. How about you?
I would say oral stories. There are a fair share of pictures, but I guess that would take the time to sit down and actually look at them.
Yes.
It takes holidays to do that is what
Right.
we almost never do it if it wasn't like, Christmas or something.
Right.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, like tragic events, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
True,
Yeah.
yeah.
People pass, then you put pictures out.
right. Yeah, Jane's got the books and she's got these, family tree charts and
Oh,
stuff.
wow. This is your 98-year-old?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of it on ancestry.com now,
Mm.
so, all the electronics.
Yeah.
That's good.
How much do you know if you're not the keeper of the law? Could you tell the stories come Christmas dinner?
I wouldn't have 100% confidence in all the
That's what-
details, some of the baseline stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, but you're fortunate to have,
I know.
grandmothers and a grandfather and,
Yeah.
I only had one grandfather and he died when I was freshman in college, I think. So I'd never had a grandmother, so
Mhm.
that's,
Yeah.
I feel like I've missed a big part of life.
Yeah.
But
I, you gotta kind of talk to them and interview them and communicate with them while they're alive, and we're all always so busy and this kind of thing. So thankfully I did take time with Mom and some with Dad. But the one thing that absolutely aggravates me to no end, well, I won't say no, but it's one of those gosh darn things. My dad's middle name was Harris. And I'm sure over the years, Dad, well, why did you get that name, Dad? Because he was originally, his father was an Anderson. He adopted the name Bean when his mom remarried, this kind of thing. So, yeah, that's where it all came from. Well, Dad, I'm sure, told us where the name Harrison came from. Well, Dad passes away before Ben's born. And at that point, all 6 of his half brothers and sisters were alive. And so I go to the family reunion and I ask each one of them, okay, where did I'm sure he told me, but where did Dad's middle name come from? And of course they knew that, his father was a guy there in Warren that ran a taxi cab company. They had all kinds of information about that, but nobody knew where it came from. So when we had Ben, that's his middle name.
Okay,
I wanted to give
yeah.
him something to honor Dad, but to this day, for the life of me, I had no
Don't know where it came.
idea what it harks back to. So me, it harks back to my dad.
Yeah.
And that's all that interests me. But
Right.
just, but isn't that just so
Yeah.
that's
Huh.
of all the stuff I do know, that's one thing I would
Yeah,
like. No, I'm not gonna-
John H says me, I'm
yeah.
planning to do that
yeah.
soon. I hear
Real
once you get
soon.
on, you're addicted.
Oh,
and
man,
get off.
it'll eat your life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah. I did that for my first sabbatical in 2010.
Oh, did you?
And yeah, I'd be up at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
tracking folks back into the 1500s,
Wow.
That's really cool, David.
Amazing.
You can go back that far.
Yeah. So I don't know if any of it is accurate at that point. I'm just like adding other people's research,
Wow.
but
Well, and then, I've thought about that. I have several friends with the last name Anderson. Anderson,
Oh,
that's one of the most,
that's my great grandparents were Anderson.
yeah, there you go. I mean, that's one of the most.
Maybe
yeah.
we're related.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
Oh, and my
You're
grand-
similar. right?
Yeah,
my grandfather was one of like 13, and I only ever met like 2 or 3 of, I
Yeah.
didn't even ever meet all of those people.
yeah.
yeah. So I have to think, okay.
And they were like in Lubbock.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like they were far away, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It was like I knew the ones that went to church, and I didn't know and I knew some of the kids from school.
Mm, Yeah.
So I would like to, find out all of that.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff. Any surprises in your family lineage that you know of? Anybody that,
I don't,
Not that I'm aware of.
although I know several people who had surprises, including Sue,
Oh, yeah.
Sue had a surprise, but I know
Yeah.
several other people that had surprises when they started doing their research.
Yeah. No, on Molly's side, there were some surprise Indians
Oh, wow.
and a few folks in the family who said, no, that never happened. Like, yeah, I think that. So that was a surprise for them. So, hey, Julie,
Julie,
Hey,
welcome.
no
Have a seat.
trouble. Welcome. We're just kind of getting started doing the
What's the
icebreaker questions here.
What's surprising to me is that I'm not related to Alan Bean, who walked on the moon. I'm not related to Hang and Judge Roy. I'm not related to Jeffrey Bean, who designed most of the shirts I wear. I'm not related to any of the Beans of any note.
And I'm not related to any of the two.
Okay. Yeah, there won't be any rich uncles dying.
Nor was
Won't-
my ex-husband related to any.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know how this started, but I guess then I should say I'm not related to any of those royal Windsors either.
Oh, yeah.
Darn, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not related to any of the famous Douthits.
Yeah, there's no surprise in my family. But the good thing is I'm not, not on any most wanted lists.
Well, that's good.
And,
That's good.
That you know of.
that I know of, yeah.
Well, welcome back.
Mhm.
And we were just talking about family histories and family lore and all that sort of thing. As we're starting into week 2 with the book here, Christmas in 4 Gospel Homes, they introduce Matthew as a place where there are a lot of family pictures around. Anybody read the stuff for this
I
weekend?
did.
I don't have a book.
I don't
Okay.
know.
Okay, all right, no worries.
No.
So they introduced it as like that house where, they've got family pictures going up the stairwell, and people getting, older and older costume as you go up the stairs. And that sort of thing. So we'll get back to that in a second, but to remind us of some of the things that we looked at this summer when we were talking about when we were doing the summer road trip through the Bible and talking about Matthew. We believe Matthew was written toward the end of the 1st century. So sometime after 70 AD. Anybody remember what happened in 70 AD?
Romans
Yeah, Romans destroyed Jerusalem. Yeah,
took it apart pretty badly too.
Yeah. so
Jeff knows a lot of stuff.
yeah.
Eh,
So temple was destroyed, Jerusalem was burned to the ground. And so it was a pretty traumatic event for the Jewish community. And at that point, the Christians were still part of the Jewish community for the most part. There were starting to be pockets of Gentiles, but there were still a lot who were Christian Jews. And that's that we'll see is the audience here. So Matthew, the book is anonymous, but it's traditionally Matthew the Apostle is the author. And the audience would have been Christian Jews. And Alexander John Shia in particular thinks that this was in Antioch of Syria or Antioch in Turkey. It's just across the border into what we call Turkey. So right up on the coast of the Mediterranean, north of Israel. And so they would have been a community that was some of them would have been refugees from the war with the Romans, and some of them would have just kind of been there in the diaspora anyway, but would have been shocked at the events that happened in 70 and trying to figure out, what do we do now? How can we be faithful if we can't go to the temple? What happened to God if the temple isn't there anymore? Did God lose? Those would have been very active questions.
That's a big deal. Even to this day, I think I heard on the Christian radio, the Jewish, if you still adhere to the old law, the sacrifices, all that kind of thing,
Yeah.
and that what has stopped them from continuing sacrificing animals is a lack of a temple.
Yeah,
That's apparently all
Yeah.
that stopped them from, otherwise it'd be right at it again.
sure, yeah. So depending on the sect of Judaism that
Yeah,
that
that
you
was
would-
very,
right. So and at that time there were different sects within Judaism, Christianity being one of them, and Pharisaic Judaism would be another, and that sort of is the one that took hold and became what we know as rabbinic Judaism.
Oh.
Now, were those sects
So yeah,
divided by region or people were intermingled?
there were
Like
probably
neighbors?
they were probably neighbors. There were probably members of those communities. People who had different beliefs in each community. I would guess. I don't know
Oh,
exactly.
they have to do with the fact that Israel and Judea were separate entities at that point, other than,
No, because at that point they would not have been.
okay.
It would have just been
Oh, still,
Judea
okay.
rather than Israel and Judah.
Oh,
So it would have been the province of Judea, which would have covered what had been Judah. And then you have Samaria, which had been Israel, and you have Galilee, which had been part of Israel. So yeah,
Clear as
it
mud.
all gets, yeah. So anyway, the Pharisees' version of Judaism was, you go to the synagogue and you hear the sermon, and that's going to be, kind of the shape of our worship now that we don't do sacrifices. And that's kind of what the Christians were doing as well. They just said, well, we know who the Messiah is, and that was the significant difference.
he's Messiah. No, he isn't. He's Messiah. No, he isn't.
No, he's not. He's a very naughty boy. Yeah. And again, Shia's thinking on this, the motif for the book of Matthew is climbing the mountain. And so there are quite a few stories in Matthew's gospel where things happen on the mountain. Matthew is particularly interested in connecting Jesus as Messiah to the roots of Judaism. And we'll see a little bit more about that. So there are a lot of references to the Hebrew scriptures, telling Jesus' story. This happened to fulfill what the prophets had said. Well, that happens a bunch. There are 5 discourses where Jesus is teaching, 5 chunks, and they're interspersed with stories of action and narrative and stuff. But there are 5 places where he's just teaching. And it could well be that was patterned after the 5 books of the Torah. So Um, So we get a lot of the stories about Jesus' backstory that we'll be looking at here today. His ministry, his passion, and the resurrection, all of that. So it's a pretty complete story. It's built on the narrative that Mark had created, or not created, but recorded. And the way that he recorded it. So it follows basically the same pattern, has a lot of the same material. It's embellished from what Mark does, because as we said last week, for those who were here, for those who weren't, Mark is bare bones. He just gives you the facts, because his community was under persecution. They didn't have time for all that other nonsense. Just give me what I need to know.
This happened.
So, there we go. So the 5 discourses, the Sermon on the Mount, talking about mission, bunch of parables, how to live in the church, and the discourse on the end times, which we were looking at just a couple of weeks ago in worship. So that's kind of what's happening in the gospel. Does that sound familiar at all?
Yes, actually.
Now, I got a whole mess of scripture here. Basically, the first 2 chapters of Matthew. So there's an awful lot going on. One of the things that is very different from Mark's gospel is that Matthew starts off with this: the account of the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. In the Greek, it is the book of the Genesis of Jesus Christ. So, and it starts with Abraham, and then you have all these begats.
I gotta love the begats.
All right, so in the King James, it would have been begats. So Abraham was the father of Isaac, Jacob, Judah, Perez, blah, blah, on and on and on. So couple of interesting entries in there, and Molly did this in PW. Was it last year that we did the women of the genealogy? Right. So we have Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Uriah the Hittite, the wife of Uriah the Hittite. 4 women appear in the genealogy. And we got 14 generations here, and 14 generations here, and 14 generations here. So that's going from Abraham to King David, from David to the exile in Babylon, from the exile in Babylon to the birth of Jesus. So 14 and 14 and 14 generations. So that's a lot of generations, and out of all that, 4 women get named. So that raises some questions.
Well,
One question might be, why only 4? But
Or what did those 4 women particularly do that was so noteworthy that they deserve mention?
yes, good question.
Yeah,
some of them were scandalous.
Some of them were. Some of them
We
were.
learned that.
We did. So Tamar, the mother of Perez and Zerah by Judah. Judah was her father-in-law, and her husband, if I remember the story, I should have looked this up, her husband died, and Judah was supposed to give her another one of his sons, and he wouldn't do it. And so she dressed up as a prostitute, and she knew Judah was making this trip, and so she went ahead, dressed up as a prostitute, and said, "Hey, new in town?"
Oh my gosh!
And he's
Yeah.
like, "Why, yes, I am." As a matter of fact, and so she said, "Well, all right, well, here's the deal." And He said, well, I don't have any cash. And she said, that's fine. Just give me something to hold on to until you get some cash. So, well, here's my ring and here's my staff. It's like, all right, excellent. And so they do the thing. She gets pregnant and disappears. And he comes back with the cash and it's like, where'd she go? It's like, yeah,
I just got my stuff.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Huh. So, but she was veiled the whole time. Right? So she ends up pregnant, comes back to his house, and says, and he sees that she's pregnant, and he's like, "Well, I'm going to kill you then." And she said, "Oh, but the father of this child had this ring, and this staff."
Yeah.
And she's like,
Hmm.
"Oh, I see."
Never mind.
We'll just
Yeah.
let this, we'll just let
Yeah.
this stay. Yeah.
Yeah,
The Bible, it's amazing how much stuff goes on. in
Yeah.
the Old Testament. It just-
and so he says to her, "You were more righteous in this than I." So, because he did not fulfill his responsibility to provide another son that she could have sons with. So that's Tamar. Rahab is, of course, the woman in Jericho who hid the spies and,
Right.
kept them safe. And so then when the Israelites came in to destroy Jericho, they kept her safe. She is reported to have been a prostitute, but may have just been an innkeeper. We don't know. It's hard to tell what the translation is, but anyway, she lived in the wall, on the edge of town,
At the very edge.
and she was a woman of some renown. Ruth was a Moabite, and Israel and the Moabites didn't get along very well most of the time. So, but she ends up being the grandmother of King David. So that's kind of interesting. The wife of Uriah the Hittite would have been Bathsheba, and she produced Solomon, and that is after David had her husband killed, so
To hide the misdeed.
to hide his misdeed of basically raping her. So, yeah, so some interesting stories show up here in Jesus' genealogy. And then we have all these folks after Uriah, after Bathsheba. These are all kings of Judah. And the ones that I highlighted there in brown were crappy kings. So they were listed in the Book of Kings or the Book of
They did
Chronicles
not
as
follow God's.
they did not follow God's
did
commands
evil in
and
the sight of
did
the
what
Lord.
is evil in the sight of the Lord, did like their grandparents did.
And
So,
it's funny how it goes back and forth between good and evil. Oh my gosh.
yeah, but just the kings of Judah,
Yeah.
you might have a couple of good kings, like Asa, Jehoshaphat were good kings, and Uzziah was a good king, but the rest of them were all lousy.
It stinks.
Whereas the kings of Israel, they all stink. They're
Yeah.
lousy. 'Cause-
Well, and God didn't even want to have them have a king.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
they insisted on, we need a king. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's like, I'm giving you the law, I'm giving you the commandments, kind of thing. And you kind of, and it's like,
Nope, we're gonna be,
we
We're
need a
gonna be
king
all
so we can really screw up.
so, anyway, that's just to highlight that there were some questionable characters in Jesus' genealogy. And so it comes down from there, 14 generations to get us to Nathan and Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, who bore Jesus, who is called. So from Abraham to David, 14 generations. From David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations. From the deportation to the Messiah, 14 generations. And Campbell says this is a theological structure more than an historical structure, because there were a bunch more kings in there than 14. So there are more than 14 generations in that particular stretch, especially. But We want to make it nice and neat. And so it's going to be 14. So that's the genealogy. And that's where his gospel starts. And that's kind of interesting. Then we have the story of this is how Jesus the Messiah was born. We read this every year, so I don't know that we need to go into great detail here with it, but it starts off, and this isn't the Annunciation to Mary, this is the one with the Annunciation to Joseph. So they are engaged, and Mary ends up pregnant and does not present a ring or a staff to Joseph. Presents the story that no, it was an angel came and told me.
Sure.
Yeah, you
yeah.
gotta wonder what Joseph is saying. It's
Oh.
like, oh, I see.
I see. Mhm. Well, what he was thinking was, I'm getting out of this. I'm going to divorce her quiet.
Well, here's the funny thing, but they weren't actually married at that point, right? They were.
It's a little more complicated than our marriage rites and rituals. To be betrothed, as the word might be, or engaged.
It's as good as the.
It's a formal arrangement, and to break it would be a divorce.
Okay.
But they don't live together right then until the husband can provide a house.
No.
Basically. And then once he's saved up and has built a house or acquired a house, then he can formalize the marriage, and then
There was
they
a
can.
heck of a lot on the guys, didn't it?
Oh yes, oh yeah.
So he's thinking, okay, I'm gonna build a house, I'm gonna get a family going, all this kind of thing, and she winds up already.
Yeah. So he figures, well, we'll just back out of this, and has a dream with an angel who says, no, this is good, this is fine, don't worry.
He's
This
up
is
there, dude.
fine, this is all fine.
So your fiance is knocked up. You know what?
Yeah.
It's okay.
It's all right, because this
You say
is
so, God.
this is from God.
Yeah.
So this is from the Holy Spirit. And you'll call him Jesus. He will save his people from their sins. Jesus meaning a transliteration of Yeshua, which means he saves. God saves.
No, we don't hear a whole heck of a lot about him after all that, right?
Joseph?
Yeah,
Yeah, no.
that's something.
Through this story, we hear about Joseph, and then we don't hear about him anymore. So then we get this first of the references to the prophecies. So this is what was said by the prophet. This comes from Isaiah. They will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. So he woke up and said, all right, well, we'll do this. Well, let's go ahead.
He said, yeah, let's just do the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do the thing.
Yeah. I'm gonna
Except
marry
they
you.
didn't do the thing.
Right.
They didn't do that thing.
They didn't
Yeah,
do that thing.
yeah.
They did the marriage
They
thing.
did the marriage thing, but didn't do the other thing until after Jesus was born. And depending on who you talk to, in the Catholic Church, they hold to the perpetual virginity of Mary,
Oh,
which.
and then where did Jesus' brother James?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, a couple more virgin births we didn't know.
Yeah, no, they have stories about that.
Ah,
So, but come on.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. All right. So how did that all happen? Well, it happened in Bethlehem of Judea. And so then we have Herod, and we have the wise guys showing up from eastern lands and all that good
Nice
stuff.
guys.
Yep. All right. So another prophecy about the Messiah being born in Bethlehem of Judea. And Herod calls the wise men and said, go find the child, come back, tell me so I can worship.
I wish it could too.
Yeah, sure. So off they go. They find following the star. They find him. They present their gifts. When it's time to leave, God says, no, don't go back to heaven. So they don't. And then Joseph has another dream. Get up, flee to Egypt with the child and his mother. Herod is going to search to kill the child.
Do we know how long Herod actually lived after birth of Jesus? No, long. I've always wondered how long that was.
Herod, I'm trying to think, Herod died before 1 BC, or before 1. So that's why you hear that Jesus was probably born between 4 and 6 BC.
Oh, because, okay.
Because they know when Herod died and was before that. So, so when they drew the line for where BC and AD swap, they missed. They miscalculated, and so that's how that.
So that means Jesus is 2023 years old. He's older than that.
Yeah, about 2030.
Well, gee whiz.
Yeah.
Unlike me, we pretend to be one age, and actually are not.
Yeah. So
So did Herod continue to try to kill baby Jesus for a long time? Or do you think he just gave up on that after a bit?
what seems to have happened, according to this story, he sent to Bethlehem to have all the children who were 2 years old or younger killed. So that was either, providing some buffer for him, or that's when he did that according to the date that he got from the wise men, magi, about when they saw the star. So somewhere in there, he figured, all right, 2 years and younger, we'll catch him. Right. And Bethlehem at that point was not a big town. So there probably weren't a lot of babies involved with this. But any number of babies killed for political reasons is too many, right? So
yes.
yeah. So might have been a handful. Growing up, I always figured it was hundreds, but it was probably a handful. But again, too many. So probably he figured it was handled, it was taken care of. Just let it go from there. But he killed lots of people after that. He was not a good man. He killed some of his sons because he thought they were plotting against him. So he was a bad guy. So when he died, then another vision of in a dream. Go back, because people who have sought his life are dead. And so he goes back, and well, go. Let's go not to Bethlehem, but let's go north, because Archelaus is there and he's miserable too. So let's not go there. So let's go to Galilee, go to Nazareth. So that's the story of how Jesus was born and came out of Egypt. Oh, that's interesting. So I saw an ad for a T-shirt that said "Merry Christmas" or "Happy Birthday to Jesus." Yeah, brown skin, Middle Eastern immigrant.
Illegal immigrant.
Yeah.
It might have had something else.
Yeah. Which might be overstating the case just a little.
Yeah.
He was a migrant, but he wasn't an immigrant from Egypt. He was an immigrant to Egypt, but returned to his own land. So I don't know how that works. Anyway,
Just enough to fire people up.
yeah. Just to get under people's skin. So, all right. So thinking about the houses of our the gospel homes here.
Yeah.
Right, getting to the so Campbell and Kevin Burns, the architect who did the illustrations, think of Matthew's house as a big Victorian house.
Hmm.
So this is as close as I could find in modern.
Edith Walker.
The Edith Walker house, yes. So houses like this, they describe Victorian houses as, you know, kind of big, and they look kind of cozy, but they also look kind of creepy. And there are a lot of rooms, and you can imagine that there are all sorts of secret places in there, and you just, you know, kind of if there's going to be a haunted house in town, it's probably a Victorian. So the Edith Walker house is a Queen Anne Victorian house. So that Queen Anne revival. Queen Anne was at the beginning of the 1800s. And then there was a revival of the architecture at the end of the Victorian era. So this combines some of, and this house apparently combines also colonial style with the Victorian style. So it's a really complex place, and a lot.
Yeah, no, it's in what?
Right across the street.
Right across the street.
Right across.
The straight across.
Straight across. The
Okay.
Yep.
Little over there.
So the
Yeah, next beside where Shirley lived.
Yes.
So to the
Yeah.
right of where
Yeah,
Shirley
Shirley's house,
Yep.
and that's the next one, yeah.
Yep. So it was built for Edith, who was the sister of Huntley.
Right, that's why the door faces.
The door
Main entrance
faces
faces that way. Over
that
the
way instead.
And there's a brick walk, it's still a brick walk that goes over there. You want to be able to keep it out. It's,
Yeah. So the
That's-
front of the house is actually
The front is the
this
side.
Yeah.
this part over here.
Hmm.
And
didn't
this
know
is a sleeping porch apparently up here.
sleeping porch. Yeah.
So for summer months, you'd sleep out there where you get a little more cross breeze. Nice big wraparound porch, and you can see they're decorated for Christmas. Got their lights up around there. If
Oh,
we
I
go
did.
out there tonight, you'll see them all lit up.
I hadn't noticed that till you pointed it
Yeah.
out.
My vision is poor. I thought they were gutter straps.
Oh, yeah, well, we might have those up there too. Originally had cedar shingles, but those got replaced in the early 1900s.
Cedar lasts a long time, but not last.
Excuse me a second. Hey, Dad, is your phone working? All right, excellent, good. Oh, okay. Good deal. Excellent. Indeed. Very good. Okay, I'm glad you got it. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Phone gun with camera.
Yeah, he had managed to get it on airplane mode somehow and couldn't get it to turn off. So, and yeah, anyway, fixed it. So, right. So anyway, there's another shot that's from the
Yeah, that's
sort of, so that's more toward the front of the house. So very interesting collection of all sorts of different styles going on here, and you know, I mentioned my cousin Jane, Dad's cousin Jane. She also lives in a Victorian house, and so when they were talking about the Victorian house, I thought about her house, and it's not as ornate as this one, but it was built by my great grandfather Jake, and so you walk in, and there's this big staircase going up, you know, all grand staircase, and you have the parlor over on the side, and it's got the doors that slide,
Pocket
you know,
doors.
pocket doors.
Yeah,
right?
those are cool.
And then you go back to the back room, and you know, you got fireplaces in every room of the house, And,
So they heated it.
Yeah. yeah, and that's still how Jane heats the house, I think.
Oh, no kidding.
She is, uh, she's got some Scots in her.
Wow. Cool.
So anyway, that's the kind of house that they imagine Matthew having. That it's a house that's filled with tradition, and there's a lot of culture involved in.
And people?
And people, and a lot of, like I said, a lot of family pictures going back generations, and you don't know who some of these folks are, and some of them you wonder, how did they even get here? Where do they fit in? And that's what's going on with Matthew's gospel too, not just with the genealogy, but that has a lot to do with it. This sense of these are our people. This is our story. If we think about going with the wreath, there's the one on the cover of the book. It's a much fuller wreath than Mark had, which was very plain. But Christmas at Matthew's house. So where does the gospel begin? That's the kind of the root question that we're looking at here. For Mark, it began with baptism, with John showing up and let's get everybody baptized, and off we go. And
Well, that's generally acknowledged as the beginning of his ministry, right?
yeah, exactly. But for Matthew, the gospel begins with Abraham. So going way back. And so what's the thing that we know about Abraham? What's his story?
Well, he's the father of two particular nations.
Yes. Okay. So father of nations is one. What else do we know about Abraham?
Pretty old.
He was old. Yeah.
He and
So
Sarah were old.
he and Sarah were old.
And
So
barren.
so those nations came with a certain miraculous
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. 99 years old.
happening there, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Apparently she laughed out loud when God told her this was going to happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
That kind of a laugh, probably.
Mr.
Yeah.
Bubble.
What else do we know about Abraham's journey with God?
God communicated directly with him.
Yep,
I mean, he and God were like on speaking terms.
they
which
were
is-
indeed. Yep,
Speed dial.
yep, yep. What did God ask of Abraham?
He said you'd be the father of multiple generations, and ultimately would the
Yep,
Messiah would
Sacrifice his son.
he did have to. Yeah, there was the near sacrifice of that beloved son whom he had been waiting for years and years and years in all his life.
that was the test.
Yeah, and there's there's also the part where back at the beginning of his story, God says, "All right, take all that you have there and your wife and go to a land that I'll show you. Leave your father's house and go to the house that I'll show you." Not telling you where, just we're just gonna go. Your parents ever do that to you when you were a kid? Oh, come on, it's time to go. Where are we going? Huh?
My parents moved when I was 6 years old. I found him again.
Yeah, good, yeah. Yeah. So,
I got an image of that. I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
yeah.
I just do.
So, complex story for Abraham, that calling him out of the land where he belonged, calling him out of his father's house to go to a new land, making a covenant with him. I'll be your God. If you follow me and do this, you'll be my people. Right? And I will bless you and you will be a blessing. And all the families of the earth will be blessed through you. Right? So all of that is part of Abraham's story. And so for Matthew, it's important that we remember that, because that all gets tied up with Jesus. And so that story of the nations being blessed, Father of nations, God being faithful, about having to make sacrifices, all of that stuff is part of what Matthew wants us to remember as this unfolds. And that's where the gospel starts from. So the covenants, all those covenants. The other thing is, so if Mark's gospel was just the facts, man, Matthew's gospel is all in the family, not specifically the TV show, but just that phrase. Molly and I were talking about that show today. Norman Lear just
Norman
died,
Lear
so,
just
yeah.
passed away.
Yeah.
So all in family. So Jesus belongs to our family, and that's why we have this genealogy, is to tie him to King David and to Abraham. And it's a direct line. See, he is part of this. But the other side of that is that everyone in there belongs to Jesus' story. And when we get to the end of Matthew's gospel, what's the last thing Jesus says? Go out into all the world, make disciples of all nations, teaching them to follow everything that I've taught you. Right? So all the nations are part of Jesus' story. So that's important for Matthew, is this sense of belonging to the family. Does that make sense?
Very much so.
Yeah. So there's another. I like this one.
I like that one.
Yeah, and the star motif with the wise men following the star. So I thought that one worked well for me. Yeah, so we've got that genealogy, and it includes scandalous people, and it includes outsiders. A lot of quite a few outsiders, and the women in particular. So you've got a Moabite, and they're frenemies with Israel. You've got Rahab, the Canaanite woman, and Tamar, I think, might have been outside of Israel. I don't remember. Judah, he kind of played around with getting wives from other tribes, I think. So there's some of that, but I can't confirm that. And then Bathsheba was married to a Hittite, so she might have been a Hittite. And so that's outside of Israel. So we have these outsiders as part of the genealogy. And then all those other scandalous kings. Plus all the stories about all the patriarchs and their bad behavior. Then you have the Magi who show up, and they are absolutely outsiders, right? They are from Eastern lands, maybe from Persia, maybe from Moab, depending on who you talk to, but anyway, from outside of Israel. And they come, and they're not kings, of course, but they are astrologers. And astrology is verboten in Jewish law. There's several places where it says, do not have anything to do with soothsayers, mediums,
You don't do that.
Divination. That's right out. Yeah. And here they come, and they're like heroes in this story, sort of. They don't come as scientists. They don't come as astrologers. They come to worship. And so that's kind of interesting. They also are indirectly responsible for Herod trying to kill all these children and tried to kill Jesus.
They told him what was going to happen.
They told him, hey, we're here to find the king of the Jews.
King of the Jews, flag.
Yeah, I'm the king of the Jews. We're not having him. Right? So outsiders with questionable theology don't necessarily help the situation, except that they bring those gifts that probably allowed Joseph to make the trip.
So there was a substantial chunk of marketable items for sustenance.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Not just a few little presents for, hey, baby present, hey, baby warming.
Yeah.
No, this is like,
Yeah,
you'll be all right with this for a while.
this
to
is
come.
cash. Yeah,
Which I didn't know till a few years ago.
yeah, yeah. So, and then part of the Christmas story for Matthew is you got these murderous political powers versus the faithful dreamers. So you have Herod, who takes the place of Pharaoh in Moses' story, right? Right down to the killing of children, because that's what Pharaoh did. None of these Hebrews are getting too strong. Let's kill all the firstborn sons, right? So that's not cool. Nobody likes that. And then you have Joseph, who has echoes of Abraham, of Joseph, the son of Israel. Joseph with the coat of many colors and all that, who went to Egypt, of Moses and of Jesus. So Joseph gets called on this journey, and he's called to be faithful in trial, and he has these dreams of what it means to be faithful, like Joseph did. He goes to Egypt like Joseph did. He comes out of Egypt bringing God's beloved like Moses did. And he does not fight the political powers, but submits to the will of God like Jesus did. So Joseph's a pretty strong character. And it's a shame that we don't hear anything else about him, but that's a lot.
Yeah.
You know? So he's pretty cool character. And that's all part of Matthew's house. So okay, just a little bit more. So what we find here is the call to faithfulness, like Joseph and Mary. Both. We don't hear that much from Mary in Matthew's gospel, but she's there, and that family is faithful to God in the face of political destruction and in the face of all these other things. So as Matthew's community is wondering, how do we be faithful? It's like, here, do this, do like this. The temple is gone. How can we be faithful people? Well, Matthew tells us, we've got Emmanuel, God with us. And Campbell.
Things are changing, people.
Yeah. And Campbell says, it's not just us. It's us. It's not the little us, people who are just like us. It's us, the humans, the big us. God is with all us, or all y'all, like somebody says, right?
All y'all.
All y'all. Peace be with all y'all. All right. So the author says, God's vision encompasses both those to whom God has revealed God's self and the whole world and all who are made in God's image. God's promise is indeed for those of us who find our heart's true home in Jesus Christ, but it is also for the whole world that God loves so much. So, what do you think that means to say about the inclusion of those from other faiths in God's promises? Do people of other faiths get included in that?
I think it invites everybody, and that's that you understand, Christianity is an invitation. It's not a mandate.
Yeah.
We have the freedom of choice, and there's no exclusions to my knowledge.
Yeah. Tricky question. Does somebody have to be a Christian to be in Matthew's family picture? Got them magi.
Yeah, well, yeah, God used them in there. Obviously, they played a very important role.
Yeah. How do you interpret these words to apply to the rest of the human family? How do you imagine it might impact the way we live in the created world? These words being this again. But what implications are there for living in the world? What would the world
Well,
be like if we did this?
If God is saying, I love you, I love all of you so much, do unto others as you would do to me,
Mhm.
isn't the theory then that if he's not going to estrange someone or exclude someone, he would say that the community, whatever their community could be, everybody needs to look out for
Mhm.
everybody and do right and be faithful and be abiding by the covenants of what they're all taught. I don't know if that made any sense. It did in my brain when I was saying it,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, not be to be inclusive. The very thing that we talk about, at least in my world, every single day, I talk.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe we would be better about sharing and about being careful about how we use resources so that others might have, and future generations might have something. Maybe we'd um, be worried about solving poverty instead of crime, you know, as trying to find sources of crime instead of just punishing it, you know.
Yeah, environmental things,
and-
things are
yeah.
gonna, things that are gonna impact our unborn people, you know, in our family. So we'll talk about the family picture
Right.
up and down the stairway, but you're not 10 and 20, 30 years into the future. There's gonna be other people's pictures on that stairway.
Yeah,
We
Right.
need to be cognizant of how are we doing something today that's gonna impact those people too.
Yeah.
And living proper lessons.
mhm. Yeah. Who in our contemporary context might be identified as outsiders? Somebody in your own family or among those with whom you interact who are not included for some reason. And people or groups who are being singled out for not belonging.
Would that have to do with non-native people? Not necessarily those who are religiously different than us,
Mhm.
but by birth, geographically, they're from halfway across the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
There always seems to be exclusions, you know, especially around here, we know with the whole political vibe that comes out of living so close to the Capitol, and then when you know, you get for some reason, and I guess this is throughout history, people break into factions, you know,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's based along race, other times it's based along culture, sometimes it's just based on some people want one thing and other people don't want it, you know, with like the, you know, it's minor, but whether or not they want to pave old Wheatland Road, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
that's completely, but you know, I'm sure there's no racial or political or divisions there. It's just some people want paving, don't. So I think it seems to be, you know, that we tend to flock to people that,
Think
And-
like we do.
yeah, pretty much. That's what I see
Mhm.
more often than not, more than the other things.
Yeah.
At least around here, because we do really have a very multicultural area around here. So I see a lot of interaction.
Yeah. There's a show that Molly and I watch called The Expanse, and it's done now. It's been off for a couple of years, but it's a science fiction show. And it's one character. There terrible things happen at Earth, and this one guy says, "People are tribal. When things are good, your tribe can be a lot bigger, but when the churn comes, your tribe gets smaller."
There's some
And
truth to that.
you know, they're at a place where it's like our tribe, we're two. That's our tribe, that was it, for them, but, so, when things are upset, then people tend to maybe break into
The fact.
tribes more
Right.
when they're anxious.
Yeah, maybe.
So maybe if we weren't. Lots of work. Okay, all right. Must be craft time.
Craft time.
So all
Anyway,
this-
what do we do with
so
our
all this time,
ornaments
David,
last?
known
I
I'm
put
not
yours and
crafty.
mine on the
Oh,
tree.
good, good.
there.
David.
See what- So I'm
I
gonna,
completely forgot about that.
I'm gonna pause the recording. Okay, so all that remains is a closing prayer and we'll be on our way. So let us. We give thanks, O God, for the gift of Jesus Christ, your enduring presence with us. Guide us as we continue to discern what it means that the promise is for us, for the great big us, the whole human community. Open our hearts to a clearer understanding of your vision for the cosmos. For it is in the name of Emmanuel that we pray. Amen.
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 All right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks for hosting.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks. You're on your prep time.